this laptop is a celestial convergence. It's like Intel's Meteor Lake CPU crashing into NVIDIA's RTX GPUs for an epic cosmic event. At least that's how we imagined it. Now this is the Alienware M16 R2 gaming laptop, and we're about to find out what Meteor Lake can do when paired with a discrete GPU. And it's all about to go down right here, right now on Robeytech. We're no strangers to laptops around here, and we've seen our fair share of Alienware's offerings, but this one's pretty special. Ever since we checked out the MSI Prestige 16 AI Evo, we saw the potential of Meteor Lake. And we were dying to know how well Intel's new power-efficient mobile architecture would play in the sandbox with the help of a discrete GPU. Now we love the fact that Intel's integrated their Xe GPU cores into the new Core Ultra chips, and they've been improving their GPU performance since launch, specifically with driver updates. Seriously, these performance improvements have been great, but if you're looking for that next level gaming experience on your laptop, you're gonna want something a bit more powerful. And right now, NVIDIA seems to be the only sheriff in this Alienware town suited for the job. So I guess you could say the M16 R2 brings cowboys and aliens together in a way that actually makes sense. So let's get to know this laptop before we show you what this thing can do. Measuring in at 14.33 inches or 363.9 millimeters wide, 9.81 inches or 249.4 millimeters deep, and 0.93 inches or 23.5 millimeters tall, and having a weight of 5.75 pounds or 2.61 kilograms, the Alienware M16 R2 carries all the aesthetic form that we've come to appreciate about Alienware. Now for comparison, that's pretty hefty for a laptop when compared to other Core Ultra laptops we've actually seen. This isn't surprising though, considering that its weight falls in line with other 16-inch laptops like the MSI Vector 16 at 5.95 pounds or 2.7 kilograms, or Gigabyte's G6X at 5.64 pounds or 2.5 kilograms. In other words, it's not exactly the thin and light of the 3.31 pound or 1.5 kilogram MSI Prestige 16 AI Evo, or the 0.68 inch thick of the Asus ROG Zephyrus, but it's on brand when you consider Alienware. What is also on brand for Alienware is the number of configurations the M16 R2 can actually come in. The one we're looking at today costs $1849.99 at the time of this video, and here's what you get for that price. At its core, this model has the Intel Core Ultra 7 155H processor. This CPU has 6P or performance core, or 8E or efficiency cores, and 2 low-powered E cores with speeds up to 4.8 GHz. Because Alienware loves options, the model can also be configured with the beefier Core Ultra 9 185H for an extra $150. Moving on to GPU options, the Alienware M16 R2 pairs the new Core Ultra processor with NVIDIA's RTX 40 series GPUs. In this model, we have an RTX 4070 mobile, but there are options for either an RTX 4050 or 4060 mobile as well. The M16 R2 has a 16-inch QHD+ or 1600p display with a refresh rate of 240 Hz and a color gamut that covers 100% of the sRGB color spectrum. This display is also G-Sync enabled, and it also has NVIDIA's technology called Advanced Optimus, which intelligently switches between the discrete and integrated GPU, which saves power. We did notice though that this felt a bit sluggish, so if it bothers you like it did to us, you can just pop into NVIDIA's control panel and force the laptop to use the discrete GPU at all times. The trade-off here is that it will require some extra go juice, which is pretty much battery life. Now just a quick aside here, this combination of CPU, GPU, and display resolution will be an interesting one to watch when you get down to our testing. At 1600p, both the CPU and GPU will be working hand in hand to drive frame rates. Will the Core Ultra 7 155H be able to hold up its side of this task? Well, we're going to find out soon enough. For storage, this configuration of the M16 R2 comes with a 1TB NVMe SSD. The good news is that there is an additional NVMe slot in which you can add another drive. Alienware does give buyers the choice to add up to 8 TB of storage across 2 4TB NVMe drives, which is a lot of storage for your secret collection of PC building memes, which we love to release every single day. Just share them. That's what we think. Memes are made for sharing. Now, as for system memory, the Alienware M16 R2 comes with 16 GB of DDR5 RAM running at 5600 megatransfers. Again, if you are configuring this through Alienware, there are options to choose from 16, 32, or 64 GB of RAM. Now, since this chassis is similar to other Alienware laptops, the M16 R2 is simple enough if you have the patience and the right tools. With a small Phillips head screwdriver to get the screws out and a plastic iFixit pick, not a guitar pick, you can gently free the back cover from the tabs, securing it in place. There is also a little lip that hooks underneath the back, so order of operations is important for getting inside this thing. Loosen the sides and then the front before moving to the back, and you should be absolutely golden. Once inside, the RAM is hidden underneath a metal cover, which has a fun Alienware thermal pad on it, and the open NVMe slot is right next to it on the left. All in all, we give the Alienware M16 R2 a passing grade on DIY upgradability. Speaking of doing things yourself, do yourself a favor and go ahead and slap that subscribe button, whip that like button, and you know what? Ring that notification bell so you don't miss out on videos like this one in the future. You know what? You might learn something and get some laughs along the way. Let's get back to the laptop. Now, when it comes to external connectivity, the Alienware M16 R2 has a generous amount of it. A whole list is gonna pop up here on the screen. Feel free to pause here if you don't wanna miss it. Basically, we have lots of USB, some Thunderbolt, and a 2.5 gigabit Ethernet port, which we love to see. It does have one of those pull-down tabs to lock it into place, which we don't love so much. For input, the M16 R2 has Alienware's M-series keyboard with per-key RGB lighting thanks to Alienware's Alien FX software. These keyboards, they're decent, but I've got to say that full arrow pad and using that short and shift key, that's not our favorite, and there are alternatives. But if you want to know how much it actually bothers us, check out our full review on the Asus RG Strix G16. We have a word or two that we could share on that. What is our favorite though is the ring of RGB lighting around the multi-touch gesture-sensitive touchpad. I know RGB isn't everyone's favorite thing, but it looks actually really cool and it really provides a clean aesthetic for the whole laptop. As for battery life, this laptop has a 90 watt-hour battery and a 240 watt power supply. The power supply, which I know you guys love to see the measurements for, weighs 1 pound or 0.45 kilograms, so pretty light. It measures in at 5.98 inches or 152 millimeters long, 3.05 inches or 77 millimeters wide, and 0.94 inches or 24 millimeters tall. For comparison, that's slightly smaller than 2 bananas, but definitely smaller than a Robeytech. Unfortunately, but actually fortunately, this power brick isn't quite the personal defense weapon we've seen with other Alienware laptops, which I think you would all agree is a good thing. Now, in our battery test, we've got 7 hours on this thing, which is pretty fantastic. And that isn't sitting and watching Robeytech live streams. This is using UI Procion's Office Productivity Battery Life Benchmark. So this recreates tasks you may do on actual battery life, opening and closing Word documents, importing and exporting files, converting PowerPoint presentations to video, and so much more. In other words, it's doing a lot and using it the way a user typically would, so well done Alienware on the battery life. And with that, it's finally time to talk about how the Alienware M16 R2 performed at 1600p in our gaming benchmarks. In Cyberpunk 2077, running at Ray Tracing Ultra with DLSS set to auto, and of course we turned frame generation on, we saw an average frame rate of 68.62, so that's the max you'll see in something like Cyberpunk. In Forza Horizon 5 in extreme settings with DLSS set to auto and frame generation on, you're looking at 103 frames per second. In Modern Warfare 3, if you're wanting to play some campaign, you're looking at extreme settings with DLSS set to balance, and of course we turn on frame generation, looking at 113 frames per second. And in Shadow of the Tomb Raider with the M16, we saw 140 frames per second with DLSS set to balance and graphics presets basically set to the highest. Finally, we got Tiny Tina's Wonderland with graphics set to badass and FSR 2.0 set to balance. We saw an average of 102.25 frames per second. And then of course, finally in your competitive titles where we're trying to get the absolute best performance using low visual settings, we saw an average frame rate of 190 when we were talking about Apex Legends and Modern Warfare 3. Again, competitive settings, we're looking at 194 frames per second. And finally, we got Fortnite, low visual settings, basically trying to get the fastest performance with the best ones for competitive play, 219 frames per second. So let's hit thermal performance, basically at idle. We've got our Core Ultra CPU resting at an average of 42 degrees Celsius. We talk about full CPU load, the M16 R2 was a bit balmy when things with an average temperature of 99. That's really warm for a laptop though, arguably not normal use scenario. Finally, in our gaming benchmarks, the Alienware M16 R2 held the Core Ultra 7 155H processor at a steady of 77 degrees, which again, does feel a bit warm, but honestly nowhere near dangerously so. And again, this is a gaming laptop, but surprised to see such high temps on a Core Ultra CPU. Now the M16 R2 is cooling the CPU and GPUs with their Cryotech thermal technology, which if we're gonna decipher that, that's basically means that the M16 R2 uses 4 copper heat pipes, 2 fans, and a 4-way exhaust system for cooling. Okay, so what about fan noise though, Robey? I mean, we know it's kind of warm, but how does the fan feel and how does it perform acoustically? When we look at the numbers, we recorded the Alienware M16 R2 running at 44.3 decibels when at idle, but under load it hit 66.7. That's pretty much in line with what we've seen with other Alienware laptops, including the M18. In other words, the fans are going to be noticeable when they ramp up. For comparison, the decibel level lands somewhere between normal conversation and city traffic. New York City traffic. Some people find both of these things annoying, while others welcome that and move on with their day. Now, with all of this data, there's obviously that big lingering question: how does the Intel Core Ultra 155H compete with other laptops with a similar display resolution and the same GPU? We actually had an Alienware M16 R1, which we reviewed last fall, that had a Core i7-13700HX and an RTX 4070, which makes for a really good laptop comparison. In power consumption, the Meteor Lake M16 R2 beat the R1 by a significant margin, which is what they're supposed to. And that margin, the M16 R1's 13700HX averaged 58% more power consumption on the CPU than the Core Ultra 7. For context, that's 8.94 watts versus 14.84 watts at idle, 45.12 watts versus 66.17 watts at gaming, and 90.47 watts versus 147.3 watts at CPU load. But Robey, what about gaming? How did the power difference impact gaming? Honestly, not much. The Core Ultra equipped R2 fell an average within 4% of the R1's performance. Now, the caveat here is that in our thermal benchmarks, the 13700HX version was on average about 7 degrees cooler than the M16 R2. These two models are slightly different in design, so that could be a factor here too. Overall, what this comparison tells us is that for our first outing of a newly designed chip, the Core Ultra 7 155H is doing okay for itself. However, we are comparing a processor designed for a thin and light laptop, the Core Ultra 7, against a mobile chip designed for high power and performance. So when you start getting into CPU load comparisons, when we compared the Cinebench score, the M16 R2, basically their Core Ultra scored 18,322 in CPU, versus the M16 R1, which again we have a 13700HX, that scored 21,990. Again, this isn't to downplay the Core Ultra CPU and what it can do, just setting expectation. You're gonna have to consider what's most valuable to you in a laptop. A 3,000 plus Cinebench score difference is pretty significant, but so is 7 hours of battery life, so you gotta choose which one you want. So when we wrap this up, what did we actually think of Alienware's M16 R2? Well, it felt like an Alienware laptop with a slightly slimmer chassis. The only thing it was missing was that RGB caboose at the back, which we've seen with other models. While the overall weight is slightly lower than other Alienware models we've seen, it's neither thin nor really light. But we don't think that's what Alienware was actually going for here. Now, this is a personal preference thing, but the overall design feels a little bit too safe. With Meteor Lake being a whole new breed of CPU, we were hoping to see Alienware's take on what would really be a thin and light. The design is just too close to other M-series laptops, but I guess we shouldn't be surprised since it's an M-series laptop. We just wish they had taken some more risks here. Now, since we're talking about changes Alienware, we're gonna need to talk about your software. We get that you want people to see all the fun new products you have to offer, but we cannot tell you how many times we were looking for the Alienware Command Center and clicked on the My Alienware app and said, come on, My Alienware makes it feel like I should see about My Alienware. Can we get a unified solution here or call it something completely different? I know we can't be the only ones who've actually done this. Personal preference aside, this is where we landed on the Alienware M16 R2. It's a solidly okay laptop. Gaming on it was fine. Using it for work was fine. The construction was fine. But nothing really stood out for it that was actually remarkable. So we had to do some research because maybe, just maybe, it was the pricing that was going to set the M16 R2 apart. But then we found an equally spec'd Asus RG Zephyrus G16 with a Core Ultra 9 185H for $50 more. And our review is coming out for the Zephyrus G16 very soon. Remember though, you could actually get the M16 R2 and have that $50 more as well and get that Core Ultra 9, but the differences didn't stop there. The Zephyrus G16 is about a 1/4 inch or 6.23 millimeters slimmer, nearly 1.7 pounds or 0.76 kilograms lighter, and it's running a stunning 240 Hz OLED display. The other thing worth noting is that this spec for the Zephyrus G16 is the entry level. There are models for the 4080 and 4090 too. But for the M16 R2, the RTX 4070 was the ceiling. So when we look at the comparison like this, the M16 R2 is overshadowed by its competition at this level. However, with the wide range of configurations the M16 R2 offers at the lower end of the GPU spectrum, that actually may be more appealing to you. And maybe, you know what, you're the type of person who really loves the Alienware aesthetic. If that's you, you're really just gonna like this laptop. It just didn't click with us. But again, I've spent a significant amount of time with the Zephyrus, and I know what the speakers and everything else are, and so that's the part that kind of paints my picture, and that's why we do these reviews. We say this all the time though, and it's so worth repeating. There is no one size fits all when it comes to tech solutions. Putting our opinions aside, the M16 R2 functions well as a gaming-centered laptop with a very good battery life. As a Core Ultra-based laptop, the Alienware M16 R2 offers a versatile platform to enjoy what Intel is doing with Meteor Lake. And at the end of the day, what we saw in the Alienware M16 R2 was a laptop that showcased Meteor Lake efficiency backed by the power of an NVIDIA RTX graphics solution. I want to close this out with a thought from our Meteor Lake laptop buyer's guide, which is either coming or you could just check out right here, because this thought encapsulates our experience with the M16 R2 so well. A laptop like this one is a lot like a Red Mage in Final Fantasy, or a Paladin in World of Warcraft, or a well-rounded D&D character. It can be good at a lot of things, but what it's good at all depends on how you spec it. What Alienware did by pairing the power-efficient Core Ultra processor with a powerful RTX 40 series GPU is provide a versatile sandbox for this brand new CPU to play in. So those are our impressions of the Meteor Lake-based Alienware M16 R2, but we want to know what you think. Do you like the aesthetic of this laptop? Compared to other laptops you've seen in this kind of family now, like which ones are your favorite, and is this a laptop you're actually considering? I'd love to know all that in the comments below. Now while you're down there, go ahead and slap that subscribe button, whip that like button, and ring that notification bell so that you get a notification each and every time we post a video like this right here on Robeytech. And if you want to continue the conversation, just want to know a little bit more about laptops or talk about what might be the best option for you, head over to our Discord server, discord.gg/Robeytech, amazing place to talk to other like-minded tech and PC enthusiasts about your experiences and their experiences, and you know what? You might just make a friend. Also follow us at Robeytech on social everywhere. Thank you so much for watching. We look forward to seeing you on the next one.